afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jill. Really great to, I think, see so many of you here today. It's hard to see past the lights. Thanks for joining our session in this breakout. So I'm Yasmin Hall. I've been working with some of our largest EMEA brands for the last couple of years. And today I've got the pleasure of talking to 3 industry experts from some fantastic brands that we work with. So I'm joined by Gianna Patak from Alamedia, got Josh Williams from Legal & General, and Oscar Lopez from Orange. Now, when it comes to marketing and advertising technology, I think we can all recognize that it's a very noisy space out there. It can be difficult to cut through some of that noise and to make sense of what's going on in the space. We today are going to bust through some of those myths and some of the jargon surrounding Madtech, and we hope that you'll be able to leave here with your own perspective to bring back to your organizations. Now, the evolution of marketing technology and advertising technology, which we know today as Madtech, has become such a critical component of a marketing strategy for businesses to get right, especially when they're striving to stay ahead. But it can be a very difficult combination to crack and perfect. So I'm sure maybe there's some of you in the audience today who have faced a challenge with integrating some of your first-party data strategies, or perhaps some of you have had a challenge transitioning from that DMP world through to a CDP world. But we're going to hear from our panelists on how they've approached some of these challenges and how they're now leveraging the benefits of Madtech to really drive deeper connections with their customers. So let's kick off. Let's start by painting a picture of the current Madtech landscape. Josh, we know that shifts in data privacy regulations and emergence of new technologies like CAPI are really shaking up that Madtech scene. So I'd be interested to understand a little bit more around how that evolving landscape has changed how you're approaching Madtech at Legal & General, and just see if it's presented any opportunities or any challenges for you.
Yeah, of course. I think the one thing I would say is that it does present enormous opportunities, challenges as well, but I think it's worth grounding ourselves in the notion that cookies weren't very good. I think, they weren't very good for identity. I think Ali in his talk this morning really sort of hit the nail on the head. Cookies live at the browser level, and they don't represent your customers. They represented the browser and the device. And, people who've, snake oil salesmen who've been selling you cross-device targeting with cookies, it just wasn't happening. I think they weren't very good at measurement. I think, they are responsible for the continued prevalence of last-click attribution. And I know that, some people out there will go, oh, you could do multi-touch attribution and that's gone. Multi-touch attribution, again, was still, hard to understand. In some cases required a third-party vendor, etc. It wasn't perfect. And also, crucially, they were not built for the smartphone app-based kind of era and world that we now live in. And, with AI to come, cookies predate all of that, and they haven't really evolved with the times. And so whilst there is an enormous amount of uncertainty and sort of trepidation out there, I do believe that, as an advertiser, a room full of advertisers, publishers, and consumers, together we will come out the other side with a sort of an ads ecosystem that is in better shape. So I'm actually super excited.
Yeah, amazing. And Oscar, what impact has this had at Orange?
So I think one of the things was changing the mindset. So originally we had a DMP, so we have to educate different stakeholders how works the CDP. So for example, media teams, they keep going asking me, what's the match rate? How's working that? How's the match rate between the audiences? But also we have to change internally how you wanted to use the CDP, because before audiences were aggregated. We know this type of consumer is postpaid. But now with CDP, we have a lot of granular information about the user. We know which tariff they have, the behavior on that session. We have to figure out how to connect that with our digital assets, like the e-commerce or the chatbot.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Diana, how about Alamedia? How have you approached this?
So basically, it really forced us to go back to the square one and become very creative about how we collect zero and first-party data. Also, we're a 150 years old company in Sweden. We have 17 magazine brands, and now we also have online content. We have about 8 sites with a lot of content. And we basically had to accelerate our digital transformation journey to sustain more than 150 years, and to become even more profitable. Our customer base is aging. We know that our biggest competitor is social media. People don't buy magazines as much, and so the third biggest point for us was to invest into creating our own advertising tool where we actually can monetize the value of the first-party data that we own.
And being such an old organisation, 150 years, you mentioned, how have Alamedia adapted to some of the changes in this landscape? What have you put in place?
Yes, so initially I started in tech analytics and data department in martech, and I was first more in charge of stitching. And a lot of people came to my desk and they asked me, like, what do you do? Like, what do you actually do? And then I'll tell you later what I do, and I'll show you some results. But basically, I had to go and show also the marketing department, like, what is the value of the CDP? Because I think, like, first we focused on personalization, the user stitching, but there's immense value of the fresh data in marketing platforms. It's incredible. And basically, that was the one of the things that I was working on the hardest. It took a lot of stakeholder management skills, and it was difficult at times, but we got there, and now I've been sucked into the commercial department.
They saw your skills. Josh, I understand at Legal & General, you made some organisational changes to support the internal marketing team that you had, but also for that agency paid media channel. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that's worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So at L&G, we've been really progressive in the establishment of a kind of a martech team, and I've heard it, sort of people referring to everything as a centre of excellence, and it is that. But it was, I think there's a panel later or this morning or something, but essentially what that means is that previously you had we need a martech team to support the marketing function to break down those kind of organizational silos. So marketing teams typically weren't placed to actually work with first party data or to kind of liaise with kind of data teams, and it's that old sort of saying of the data was under lock and key and actually couldn't really be accessed. But what's really key for the adtech ecosystem is that a couple of years ago, not even that long ago, a media agency from one of the big holdcos or indeed an independent agency could bring along a box of proprietary tools and tech, or a media plan could have a vendor or publisher on it, and they'd drop a cookie on your website and off they go. That was all they needed. The agency could drop a cookie on their website for their insights platform, and they could build audiences and push them to DSPs, and off they go. That can't happen anymore. So there is a huge imperative on advertisers and brands to have their data and technology house in order, if you like, in order to enable our agency partners. Agencies still bring an enormous amount of talent and technology to the table and to bear, but it now needs to be way more of a partnership, and the onus is on us as advertisers. We're letting our agencies down if we don't support them in getting them the first party data that they require in order to drive effective sort of media and marketing campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on there kind of how that role of first party data is changing. And Oscar, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that evolving role of identity and
Yeah.
first-party data, especially in this post-DMP era. Could you share a bit more around your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah. So cookies is going to be a huge challenge for all the marketeers. Retargeting as we know it is going to change a lot. Right now, there are solutions based on personal identifiable information to leverage alternative IDs. My gut feeling that that's going to be needed, but we are going to need another solutions like UTIC. UTIC is a telco joint venture made by Orange, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, and Vodafone, which are leveraging the IP address to offer an ID that lasts 90 days, which is able to track users and target them on different sites. So I think in the future, we will need telcos like solutions like UTIC to be able to keep the ecosystem working in the adtech.
And I think, I heard about UTIC from Oscar, and it's also coming to the UK as well. I think Vodafone and Telefonica, O2 in this country are sort of working on it. My sort of counterpoint to that, because that always makes for a fun panel, is that is just another identifier. It's another unique identifier that is ultimately a walled garden. It's a walled garden of mobile phone providers. They are effectively that. And so it's another identifier that needs to be measured, understood, resolved, scaled, adopted. It has to be adopted by publishers, by advertisers, by the ecosystem. And so it does actually just highlight the importance of having a platform like Telium that can resolve fragmentation of identifiers back to that kind of single customer.
Absolutely, very interesting point. So let's dive a little bit deeper now in some of the distinctions between DMPs and CDPs and take a look at what their unique roles are when it comes to data management and customer insights. Josh, could you maybe talk us through some of your top distinctions between DMP and CDP and what your thought process is there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people in this room will sort of know what I'm about to say, but fundamentally, the key difference is DMPs were based on third-party data. They dealt in, cohorts, cookies, and clusters, and the CDP deals in first-party data, on an individual customer level. It doesn't have to always be PII, but obviously, typically, as you kind of forge that relationship with the consumer, PII becomes part of it. And so the second difference then, almost bleeds out of that, and that is the fact that the CDP is imminently more flexible in the sort of marketing activations that it can do. Previously, the DMP was cookies. It activated in cookie-based spaces, so the open web, etc. I just one of the things I wanted to highlight there is that I think Andre from TUI this morning, they talked about one mobile app for TUI. Apps have never had cookies in them. So a DMP, as an example, could never work in an app ecosystem. So you've always had this massive fragmentation as apps came to bear. So the CDP being based on first-party data, PII, means that you can have a single source of audience, and that can stretch all the way from CRM into paid media. You can syndicate it with new forms of ID, EUID 2.0. Telium is freshly integrated there. UTIC, I'm sure it'll come on board soon, and also kind of completely other places. I think at L&G we actually can send audiences from Telium to our call center, via Telium functions. That flexibility would just never be available via a DMP. And then the third difference is the kind of insights. So I've heard people say that DMPs were good insights platforms. They weren't. It was basically that you sort of went, these hits on your website match these third-party cookie clusters that we're also synced with, but the match rate was super low, and actually, you were scaling so far away that you were really far removed from your customers. A really funny example of an insight I once got from a DMP. I was working for a news website. I was agency side, and I was working for a news website. So just a daily newspaper, and the DMP's data insight was your audience over-indexes for news. That was it. I was like, oh, great, thanks, fantastic. I'll take that. So yeah, and then I've got a bonus difference as well, which is DMPs are sort of old legacy tech. and the CDP is now and the future, which is handy given that we're at a CDP conference. So yeah.
It sounds like you're in the right place.
Yeah.
And Oscar, you've got some fantastic examples of how Orange transitioned from a DMP-centric approach through to a CDP-centric approach. Could you talk us through some of the benefits and perhaps some challenges that you face in that transition?
So I completely agree with what Josh has said. So when we think about CDP, it's real time. So DMPs were actually a real-time tool. So they collect on real-time information, but the audience wasn't available on real-time. So people like me that were trying to use the DMP for personalization, we have the issue that we miss the audience. Yes, we collect information in real-time, but then when we want to personalize the website, the user wasn't here. So with CDP, we were able to do that. Later, on the use case, I'm going to show how Tealium is working on real-time, doing the personalization with the e-commerce. So, but also one of the challenges we had with the CDP is that before it was all cookie-based, but now you are managing also personally identifiable information. So you have to work more closely with one of the stakeholders, which is critical for this type of project, which is legal team. They have to understand now that they don't have to focus on how you collect the consent on the cookie layer, but also how do you manage the internal consent on the CRM for creating audience or even measurement.
Great.
If I might jump in, for example, for our media, what I see as the biggest advantage of CDP is the customer stitching. We're a business, we focus on B2C, but also B2B. And what it means in practice is basically we have a customer profile and we see how many magazines the user has, for example, purchased so far, what was the customer lifetime value, what kind of content they consume, but also on the other hand, on the B2B side, we see what they consume, and thus we can personalize the advertisements on the sites. And if someone consumes a lot of beauty content, we can make deals with our partners like L'Oreal or Chanel and offer the advertisement to the user, and then also double our revenues in the meantime.
Brilliant. So at Alamedia, how are you prioritizing all the first-party data that you do have? And have you put any techniques in place to boost the value of that first-party data?
Yes, so basically, as I mentioned, we're very much focused on stitching the data. We set the KPIs to increase the amount of stitched data by like twofold. And at least this year, we've also done so through newsletter stitching. And we managed actually in the last year to increase our amount of stitch users by 2.5%. As I said, we had to be really creative about how we collect the first-party data. Since we produce the content, it's nothing that users really purchase, so we need to get that data from them voluntarily, and that can be really hard. But there are different ways how we can do it by, for example, allowing the user to save more than 3 articles after they log in, or like recipes. So there are many different ways. It just requires a bit of nut cracking. And it also allowed us to distinguish between different values, values of the audiences and different customer clusters.
And have you got a specific example of how you've used first-party data within the media and advertising context? Could you share an example with us?
Yes, so we have over 100 audiences now in our platforms. We've been using audiences in Pinterest, in Google Ads, in DV360, in Meta, and Instagram, of course. And also we are using the audiences for newsletter management and for nurturing our customer base. And our main thing is that we're working on right now is to create a customer value matrix. And I would urge everyone in this room to look into it and basically how to move the customers between the clusters you create and how to get them to the next step that you want them to be in.
Great. Are there any similarities there, Josh, with what you've done at Legal & General?
Yes. With our first-party data, I think the baseline focus for us has been on the measurement. So we've seen throughout the morning how, eroding observability and kind of, increased cookie loss is happening. And so we've been focused on maintaining our ability to measure and observe. And so obviously that takes the form of conversions APIs, which, with Meta, with Google using enhanced conversions, we've implemented, and we've seen some fantastic results that we'll touch upon at the end. But what really pushes it forward is actually the sort of point I made at the top about, the sort of shortcomings of cookies was that, cookies were binary. They fire, they don't fire. They had little concept of value. And actually this ability of a platform such as Telium to support you in understanding customer value over an extended time horizon is absolutely critical. So just as an example, with L&G, you buy insurance or you have a pension holding with us, the value of you as a customer is derived over an incredibly long time horizon. I think somebody spoke about 13 years for a kitchen. We're talking 30 years for a pension or a life insurance policy. However, some very smart people in the business have come up with a predictive lifetime value model. So that model is deployed in Telium, where as somebody is going through the quote stage, we can basically, taking a small amount of information, Telium is able to call an external service and understand what internal L&G segment someone resides in. That segment is then returned, and we can calculate, using a few other kind of bits of information, in real time, by the time somebody has started their application and as they're filling out their information, by the time they finish and submit and kind of purchase, we've calculated their predicted lifetime value. And that is delivered back to the data layer using data layer enrichment. If you don't know, get to know, because it is fantastic, in order for us to optimize towards predicted lifetime value in real time. And that wouldn't be possible without Telium. So that optimization phase is where we're now really focusing our attention. I think measurement is sort of, the foundation has been built, but moving towards optimizing towards, business goals. I think, Google mentioned it earlier, represent true business value. We are now optimizing towards a metric that internally and in the sort of broader insurance industry is understood as being profitability. And that's a kind of, an enormous thing, and it's been enabled by Telium and by kind of, this new breed of measurement solutions that have replaced cookies.
Brilliant. Really interesting, and some great success there. And I think we'll dive into those in a bit more detail. Now, we've spoken a lot about first-party data that we have access to, but we know that across our organisations, we've got access to such a variety of data. I'm really keen to understand a little bit more around how you're differentiating between zero, first, second, and third-party data, and what the approach is in your organisation. So, Oscar, could you tell us a bit around how Orange are doing this?
So I think when we're talking about zero-party data, is from users who are leads. They are not a non-customer or user who have provided the information about you, but are not already your customers. So in Orange, we have a lot of initiatives to collect the data, whether it's for forms, for click-to-call, chatbots, to be gathering this information, and obviously on the physical stores to collect this data. With first-party data, we have to be very clever. Half of the traffic on our website, we know there are customers. Because we're a telecom company, we developed, before UTIC existed, we developed an internal solution. So when the user arrives to our website and accept the cookies store in the web server, which the IP address, people from big data take that information, do some magic, and they came around and say, no, this cookie was Oscar. So we're able to start doing personalization. And as a business, one of the challenge we have is that some of our services are pretty expensive. So in Spain, as you know, everyone is super fan of soccer. But if you want to purchase the TV with the soccer product, it's quite expensive, the license. So we work with banks to know, to gather how is the level income of the users. So we tailor the message to the only specific user who we think they have enough income to purchase the product. So we avoid doing like a spam message to our all customer database with offering that product. Before, when we have the DMP, we use a lot of third-party data. Right now, we are no longer using it. That's one of the things I'm keen to see what's going to happen in the near future with Google S, how it's going to work with the third-party data.
How about at Alameda, Diana? How are you differentiating between the different data sources?
Yeah, so we've been focusing a lot on zero-party data, and how we define it is basically someone can sign up for a newsletter on our site voluntarily. We've also, as I said, been really creative about how to collect it. So for example, we have a site which is called Mobra, and it's for like a motherhood and health content. And we create health courses at the beginning of the year. It's all for free, directly to your mailbox. We're submitting your email address, which is super valuable. And so we do things like that, but also we introduced login on our sites, it's continuously hard, like I said, to kind of like push people to log in since our content is for free. And also we at Alameda, we organize the biggest fashion event in Sweden every year. It's called Elle Magazine, Elle Galan. And this year, what we really experimented with was we logged the sites for, like the Elle site, for the duration of the whole weekend during the event. And people had to log in to access the content and the real-time information, what was going on, and also some behind-the-scenes content. And that really helped us just in one weekend to triple our login data. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. Like that's what I would say that is our like biggest income of zero-party data. And then obviously we have purchase data, like purchase behavior data, content browsing data. We have every article we have is tagged by different categories, whether it's like food, whether it's motherhood or beauty or home decor, and then that really allows us to do that contextual targeting for our B2B clients. Yeah, so we have different sources, and then we also work with influencers who share the data with us, but also we share the data with our sponsors and partners who also help us to organize the Elle Gala. So yeah, we have a little bit of here and there everywhere.
A good mixture. I like how you're using the event to capitalize on the data that you can capture and make the most of that. So Josh, are there any similar techniques that you've deployed at Legal & General?
Sort of, but we have a kind of a slightly sort of different problem in our kind of industry, and that is we are one of the UK's biggest pension providers via workplace, and we're also one of the UK's biggest life insurers. However, the vast majority of our business is intermediated. That means it comes via brokers and also via kind of workplaces where, for example, Orange give Oscar a pension, and L&G are the pension provider, but Oscar doesn't really know nor care about that because he doesn't really mind about his pension. And so for us, zero-party data is incredibly important, and we see its kind of strategic importance growing. So the lenses that we're thinking about it through are inferred and informed. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about inferred data, we can, understand a customer's age, how much their pension holding is, what policies they have with us. That's just a product, and maybe who their employer is. However, in that inferred data, we would assume that you're going to retire at 67 because that's the UK's national retirement age. We might assume that you want to have a modest income because that's how much you're paying in. We can see how much you're paying into your pension, so we can go, he clearly doesn't really need much in retirement. Informed is when the customer goes, I might check my pension because it's in the news or something, and they come to Legal & General. They log in, they finally kind of dig out the letter that their employer sent them. they come to us and say, oh, actually, I want to retire at 55 and I want to be pretty well off in retirement, they give us that information, and that is kind of the definition of zero party, and that would fundamentally change the course of our relationship and our communications with them. We would probably strongly advise them to increase their pension contributions, and we might direct them towards our retirement income calculator that would let them know that on their current trajectory, they're not going to be very well off at all. So I would advise you all to go and look at your pension if you don't. But yes, for us, zero party data is going to be really key, because every moment that we get to interact with our customers, where they give us a scrap of information, they inform us of something, and they give us consent, is absolutely crucial, because otherwise we kind of will really struggle, because of that intermediated nature, to build a relationship with our customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting to hear how varied it is across the different industries and the challenges that you're each facing. And there's obviously such a range of data available to all of your organisations. It'd be interesting to understand what are some of those primary sources of data, and then more importantly, how are you sifting through that and prioritising it to determine what you use in your marketing and advertising campaigns? Sterne, could you maybe kick us off there?
Yes, so the main tool for us is the stitching. So based on the stitching, we're able to cluster the users into different different buckets, as I said. And I'm a really big fan of the customer clustering, or like the audience buckets. And we can cluster them based on the content they consume or based on the demographic data. We also have a very powerful thing that we can, like, one of our our customers can basically donate the magazine, and then we get the data for the donor, the person who donated the magazine, but also for the donee, so who is going to receive the magazine. That's very valuable data for us. So we have this customer value matrix, and then the marketing team, before any campaign, they just come to me and they're like, okay, what do you recommend us to deploy this time, and how we can reach our targets? And I think the most important thing is basically to make sure that you move the customers between the brackets, so they become more loyal, or their value increases. So again, one of our biggest thing is also customer lifetime value. We have some customers who have been with us for 15 years, and there's a very big difference between a 15-year, like the customer has been with us for 15 years, 5 years, and then half a year, and they really need to be approached in a different way.
Yeah, they each require a different experience based on their loyalty with the brand. And Josh, how about at Legal & General? How are you prioritising which data you use for those campaigns you're pushing out?
I think there's a kind of, it obviously depends on the objective of any campaign that we're trying to do, but I think using the flexibility of Telium, we've got a myriad of data sources that a DMP just would not have been able to handle. So we have got Snowflake as a cloud data warehouse as a source. We've got webhooks as a source. We've got CRM. We've got media campaigns, kind of all feeding us lots of data. But I think the sort of value-based scores are kind of where we've been focusing our attention, as I said. So getting kind of long-term policy holding information from our data warehouse into Telium has been key, and then obviously sending that down to marketing campaigns. We also have kind of real-time data feeds. So one of our common sort of pieces, if you like, is people who drop out of the application, typically when they get to sort of a tricky question, or if they haven't got their card with them, typical stuff. But actually that uses a real-time source of the website to actually kind of take action. But we take the action that is best suited. So an example is, if somebody has dropped out of the application, but they've already given us their telephone number and given consent, we'll actually send them to the call center to re-engage them, rather than trying to remarket them or sending them an email. We'll actually just call them, and that all happens via Telium. So that's kind of, first-party data and kind of optimizing campaigns. But I think what's really interesting for me is the kind of complementary technologies that are springing up, kind of adjacent to CDPs. And I think, looking at sort of second-party data and data collaboration is something that is incredibly interesting for us. Data clean rooms or that sort of space. Our product is closely aligned in the insurance space to the sort of mortgage market, and typically, it again closely correlates with kind of life stages. So typically, when you buy your first house, you move house, you have to get life insurance in order to get a mortgage, or when you have your first child, or again, another child, again, you typically sort of think about, what will happen should the worst happen? Should I go and examine my life insurance policy? And so there's a myriad of data sources out there that can help us enrich and kind of expand our understanding of our customers, because we have a bit of a problem where our customers are seen fairly infrequently in the grand scheme of things. We're not a sort of fast-paced e-commerce website where people might buy multiple things a week. We do have a kind of long consideration phase, and once you've purchased, you can come back to set up and finalize and things like that. But then typically it's a bit of a set and forget. And so how can we bring the outside in via data collaboration with kind of adjacent data partners is something that we're super interested in, and I again personally think that is a better alternative to the third-party cookie and sort of buying blue sky cookie clusters and things like that. No offense.
And Oscar, can you tell us a little bit around the approach at Orange?
So it is said that there is never enough first-party data, but in the case of Orange, that's not true. I think we have too many first-party data. We know how our customers are browsing the internet, which website they are visiting. We know who they are talking on the phone, how much time. So there is too many information, and our business is more similar to a bank or an insurance that you might think at the first thought. So we need, in order to prioritize the data and to be compliant with the business rules and profitability, we have a campaign manager which is leverage the audiences to all channels. The CDP is one of these channels to distribute this audience on the digital environment. They give us to this user, sell this product, and that's how we're managing our first-party data and campaigns digitally.
Great. Really insightful to hear how it's so different across the three organizations, and to dive in some of those nuanced challenges across the three separate industries. There's obviously some underlying themes, but you're all facing it in different challenges that arise in your organizations. So I'd be really keen to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure some people in the audience would love to know about some of the successes that you've achieved in this Madtech world. I know you've got some fantastic results to share with us. So Diana, could you perhaps kick us off with some of the results and successes that you've achieved at Alamedia?
Yes, so as I said at the beginning, I was first hired to do more like a personalization and user stitching work. And I come from extensive media buying background, and I realized that the data that we had in marketing platforms was not fresh. We didn't really use any first-party data. Obviously, we struggled after iOS 14 was introduced. And so what I decided to do as a first thing, they didn't know who I was in the marketing department before, so I just had access to the platforms as like an introduction. And so one of the first things I did was that I hooked the first-party data from Telium to Meta. And I argued that we want to reach the most accurate users, and then we created a A/B test to target the lookalikes of the pixel purchases and the lookalikes of the first-party data. And the main argument was to increase the amount of subscriptions and also to decrease the customer acquisition cost. And basically, the results were amazing. As you see, not only the first-party data helped Facebook to match more users with the lookalikes, but also it generated 2 times more subscriptions, and it lowered the customer acquisition cost by almost 60%. And I think that was a really big aha moment to the marketing department, that the CDPs, not only for personalization and the user stitching and the B2B part of the business, but it's actually helping them to make and save money. And so, as I told you, when they came to me at the beginning and they asked me, what do you do? Well, now I can answer their question. So I help this business to make and save money.
Brilliant, really, really fantastic results. Oscar, how about at Orange? I know you've had some brilliant successes. It'd be great if you could talk us through some of those.
Yeah, this is a very lovely use case to explain the transition from a DMP to a CDP. So when we're starting doing the identifying customer through the IP address and leverage that data to the DMP, we use it to personalize the website, to show customer content. So the issue with that is because our business is very similar to a bank. For example, we cannot show the price of the devices because the devices, the price of the devices are based on the tariff the user has, that line, and the churn risk that specific line has. So the audiences on the DMP were aggregated. So we could not provide e-commerce with the right information to show the prices to the user without logging. With Tilium, instead, because it has this information on attribute level, we were able to tell the e-commerce this user has this tariff ID and has this churn risk, and without logging, the user was able to see the price without logging. And because the price of our device are more competitive, because we offer subsidies to the customer than if they buy on the free market, we have seen a huge increase on the conversion rate with that. I would like to show how it works on real time and explain, because it's very visual how it works. So,
It's going
sorry. So I have come from an SMS, from an email address, from I'm a customer. When I set the cookies on real time without changing the page, you can see on real time on Tilium that it's saying that I'm a customer. And I'm obviously an anonymous customer. At this time, Tilium hasn't been able to talk with the commerce. But in the next interactions, you will see that the content is going to be for customers. So in this time, Tilium has to speak with the commerce. Now, the content is fully personalized for customers. However, as you see, there are no showing prices because I'm no customers. Now, I'm adding a parameter with the customer ID, which is obviously obfuscated for privacy reasons. On real time, Tilium is retrieving the customer information, so it knows a known customer, have cyber and mobile line, and knows who I am. But because we haven't refreshed the page, the content is not being shown the prices. Now, Tilium has to speak with the commerce, and you're seeing the prices. And I'm opening another tab. I'm going to log on the commerce to show that this process will work fine. €34 when I'm logged, and then if I check the tab of the homepage, €34 without €34.
Great. Really impressive, and I think there's probably a few people that would be keen to pick your brain on that over coffee in the next session. And Josh, finally, just to wrap up, there's been some fantastic results at Legal & General. It'd be great if you could just talk us through some of the successes that you've achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've spoken a lot about convergence APIs today and kind of throughout the sessions, but for us, it was obviously that kind of foundational piece that we've been tracking over about, I think, over 18 months now. And so effectively what the slides you're looking at demonstrate is that by implementing kind of conversions API, we have seen across Google and Meta a circa 11% uplift in observed conversions. I think if you remember back to the Google presentation earlier, 3% was the average for search, and then obviously there was 17% for YouTube. We do both of those platforms, and that is a kind of a blended figure. So I think we're kind of, above average, but, seeing really, really solid results across the board. What's really key to kind of take away, though, is this gap. Well, there's two things to take away, actually. This gap is going to get bigger as we kind of move away. And I would wager that for a lot of advertisers out there, this gap is already significantly bigger. Our nature of our business means that we get quite a lot of desktop traffic. If you are a business that is predominantly app consumed or is predominantly kind of mobile, particularly iOS devices, if you have that tilt, your gap will already be significantly bigger than this. And so this is an 11% increase in counted conversions. However, what's really kind of key is underlying this is that we've moved beyond this sort of binary application of conversion now, and actually alongside the sort of server-side passing of conversion, we're sending far more information than would be previously possible. So things like a predicted lifetime value score, you can send any number of attributes. If you're an e-commerce retailer, you could send margin information, returns level information, product SKUs, etc. The options are endless by moving towards this kind of API-led measurement approach that can take you beyond understanding that binary pixel, fire, not fire. Is it in the data layer? Is it not? Telium can actually enable you to kind of push way more information than was previously possible. So those numbers are interesting, but actually it's what was underlying and associated with those numbers that's actually the kind of the biggest shift for us.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for taking us through your approaches, the insights from your organisation, how you've overcome some of these challenges. Great to hear about some of the different nuances across the industries, but I think the underlying theme is that you all have access to this really rich, great first-party data that we can see from the results you're using to kind of drive those better customer experiences and create those moments that matter with all of your customers as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone found it insightful.
Okay.